What makes this strike particularly significant is not just the level of force used, but the remarkable precision and coordination behind it. This was clearly not a rushed or reactive operation. It reflects a long process of intelligence gathering, surveillance, and strategic planning. For such a strike to succeed, detailed information about target locations, movement patterns, and defensive systems must be collected over time. This often involves satellite monitoring, signal intelligence, and possibly on-ground sources, all working together to build a complete picture before any action is taken. The precision element is especially important because it shows a shift in how modern military operations are conducted. Instead of relying on widespread attacks that affect large areas, the focus is now on hitting specific, high-impact targets with minimal margin for error. This requires advanced technology such as precision-guided munitions, real-time tracking systems, and coordinated communication between different units. When all of these elements come together, the result is a strike that can deliver maximum strategic impact within a very short time frame. Another aspect that stands out is the timing of the operation. Precision is not just about where the strike happens, but also when it happens. Choosing the right moment can significantly increase the effectiveness of the attack. This could involve targeting locations when they are most active, or when key individuals are present, or even when defensive systems are less prepared. Timing, in this sense, becomes just as critical as accuracy, adding another layer of complexity to the operation. The scale of the strike also amplifies its impact. When multiple targets are hit in a coordinated manner, it creates a compounded effect. Instead of dealing with a single point of damage, the affected side has to respond to multiple disruptions at once. This can overwhelm response systems, delay coordination, and create confusion in the immediate aftermath. The combination of precision and scale is what makes such operations particularly effective in achieving their intended objectives. There is also a signaling aspect behind such a carefully executed strike. Precision sends a message about capability. It demonstrates not only the ability to reach specific targets, but also the confidence to do so with accuracy. This can influence how the opposing side perceives the situation, as it highlights vulnerabilities that may not have been fully recognized before. It also sends a message to other observers about the level of technological and strategic advancement involved. At the same time, executing a strike with this level of precision requires a high degree of coordination between different branches of the military. Air units, intelligence teams, and command centers must all operate in sync. Communication has to be clear and uninterrupted, and decisions must be made quickly as the situation evolves. Any breakdown in coordination could compromise the mission, which is why such operations are often seen as a reflection of overall military capability, rather than just a single event. All of these factors together show how the scale and precision of the strike are not just about the immediate damage caused, but about the deeper layers of planning, execution, and strategic intent that define modern conflict. One of the most impactful elements of this situation is the nature of the targets that were reportedly hit, as they appear to be carefully selected for their strategic importance rather than their visibility alone. High-value targets are not chosen randomly. They are identified based on the role they play in maintaining a country's military strength, coordination, and long-term operational capability. These can include command centers, weapons storage facilities, communication hubs, and locations tied to advanced defense systems. Striking such targets is designed to create disruption that goes far beyond the immediate damage seen on the ground. What makes high-value targets especially significant is their connection to decision-making and control. Many of these sites are directly linked to how a country plans and executes its military actions. When they are hit, it can interrupt the flow of information, delay responses, and create gaps in coordination. Even temporary disruption can have serious consequences, as it forces leadership to reorganize under pressure, often while dealing with limited or unclear information about the situation. There is also the possibility that individuals associated with key strategic roles were present at or connected to these locations. When such figures are affected, the impact becomes even deeper. These individuals often carry experience, authority, and knowledge that cannot be easily replaced. Their absence can slow down critical decisions and create uncertainty within the system. At the same time, it can trigger internal pressure to respond strongly, especially if their roles were highly visible or influential. Another important aspect is how these targets are often protected by multiple layers of defense. Reaching them requires overcoming surveillance systems, air defenses, and other protective measures. The fact that they were successfully struck suggests a level of planning that accounted for these defenses in advance. This could involve identifying weaknesses, timing the operation to reduce resistance, or using specific methods to bypass detection. Successfully hitting well-protected targets sends a clear signal about capability and reach. The broader impact of hitting high-value targets is not limited to immediate operational disruption. It can also influence morale and perception. Within the affected country, such strikes may create a sense of vulnerability, especially if the targets were considered secure or critical. This can lead to increased caution, internal reviews, and changes in how resources are allocated. At the same time, it can strengthen the resolve to respond, as leadership may feel the need to demonstrate that such actions will not go unanswered. On the international level, targeting high-value assets draws significant attention because it reflects a deliberate escalation in strategy. It indicates that the objective is not just to apply pressure, but to directly challenge the core capabilities of the opposing side. This raises the stakes as it moves the conflict into a phase where actions are more consequential and responses are likely to be more intense. All of these factors show how the selection and successful targeting of high-value sites carry implications that extend well beyond physical damage, affecting coordination, perception, and the overall direction of the conflict. The signals coming from Iran's immediate reaction are being closely watched because they reveal not just emotion, but intent. When a country begins to respond quickly after a major strike, it usually indicates that the situation has crossed a threshold that cannot be ignored. In this case, the tone, speed, and pattern of early reactions suggest that the response is not being treated as a routine incident, but as a serious escalation that requires a calculated and potentially strong reply. One of the clearest indicators of this is the visible shift in military posture. Movements of equipment, changes in readiness levels, and increased activity around strategic locations all point toward preparation rather than hesitation. These kinds of adjustments are rarely made without purpose. They signal that planning is already underway and that different response options are being considered at the highest levels. Even if a full response has not yet been executed, the groundwork for it is being actively put in place. Official messaging also plays a key role in understanding the situation. Statements coming from leadership or military representatives often carry carefully chosen language. When those statements begin to emphasize strength, retaliation, or consequences, they serve as both internal reassurance and external warning. The wording may be measured, but the underlying message is clear: that a response is expected and that it is being framed as necessary rather than optional. Another important factor is the speed at which these signals are appearing. In less serious situations, responses can take time as leaders evaluate options and consider diplomatic channels. But when reactions come quickly, it suggests that contingency plans may have already existed for such scenarios. Many countries prepare in advance for potential strikes, outlining possible responses so they can act without delay if needed. The activation of these plans is often reflected in rapid, visible changes on the ground. There is also a strategic element to how these signals are presented. Not every preparation leads directly to immediate action. Sometimes the display of readiness itself is part of the response. By showing that forces are mobilizing and that options are being prepared, a country can send a message intended to deter further strikes or to influence how the opposing side calculates its next move. This kind of signaling becomes a form of communication without direct confrontation, though it still contributes to rising tension. At the same time, the combination of preparation and messaging increases the pressure on decision makers. Once expectations of retaliation are set, both internally and externally, it becomes more difficult to step back without taking some form of visible action. This can narrow the range of choices available, pushing the situation further toward escalation rather than de-escalation. All of these elements together show how immediate reactions are not just emotional responses, but structured signals that reflect planning, intent, and the potential direction of what may come next. One of the most serious concerns at this stage is the growing possibility of a full-scale retaliation, which goes far beyond a limited or symbolic response. When a country begins preparing for retaliation on this level, it usually means that the objective is not just to respond, but to reassert strength, restore deterrence, and send a clear message that such actions will not go unanswered. This kind of response is often carefully planned to create maximum impact, both militarily and psychologically. Full-scale retaliation is rarely limited to a single strike. It often involves a combination of different approaches designed to apply pressure from multiple directions. This could include direct attacks on strategic targets, coordinated operations across different monadic, and the use of various military tools that serve different purposes. The goal is to create a response that is broad enough to demonstrate capability while also being targeted enough to achieve specific strategic outcomes. Another key aspect is the timing and sequencing of such retaliation. Instead of happening all at once, responses may be carried out in phases. An initial action might be followed by additional moves, each designed to build momentum and maintain pressure. This phased approach can make it harder for the opposing side to predict what will happen next, increasing uncertainty and forcing them to stay on constant alert. There is also the possibility of expanding the scope of the response beyond direct confrontation. In many situations, retaliation can include indirect methods that target interests in different locations. This can increase the reach of the response without concentrating everything in one place. As a result, the conflict becomes less predictable and more difficult to contain, as it no longer has clear boundaries. The decision to move toward a larger retaliation is also influenced by internal and external pressures. Internally, leadership may feel the need to demonstrate strength and maintain credibility. Externally, there may be expectations from allies or supporters that a strong response will be delivered. These pressures can shape the scale and intensity of the retaliation, making it more extensive than it might otherwise have been. At the same time, preparing for a response of this magnitude requires coordination, resources, and readiness across multiple levels. Military units need to be aligned, communication systems must function without disruption, and strategies must be adaptable to changing conditions. The complexity of this process reflects the seriousness of the situation, as it involves balancing immediate reaction with long-term consequences. All of these elements highlight how the risk of a larger retaliation introduces a new level of intensity into the conflict, where actions are no longer isolated but part of a broader and more sustained effort to influence the direction of events. The growing instability across the region is one of the most concerning aspects of this situation, because it shows how quickly the effects of a single major strike can spread beyond its original target. The Middle East is a highly interconnected region, where political, military, and strategic relationships are closely linked. When tension rises between two major players, it rarely stays contained, as neighboring countries and regional actors begin to feel the pressure almost immediately. One of the first signs of rising instability is the increase in military alert levels across surrounding areas. Countries that may not be directly involved still begin to strengthen their defenses, reposition forces, and prepare for potential spillover effects. This includes securing borders, increasing surveillance, and protecting critical infrastructure. These precautionary measures reflect a growing concern that the situation could expand, even if unintentionally. Another important factor is the presence of alliances and partnerships within the region. Many countries have established relationships based on shared interests, security agreements, or political alignment. When a conflict escalates, these alliances can influence how different nations respond. Some may feel obligated to support one side, while others may take steps to protect themselves from being drawn in. This creates a complex network of reactions, where each decision adds another layer to the overall tension. Economic activity in the region is also affected by this instability. Trade routes, especially those related to energy and shipping, become more vulnerable during times of conflict. Businesses may face disruptions, delays, or increased costs, which can impact not just local economies, but also global markets. As uncertainty grows, companies and investors often become more cautious, slowing down economic momentum and increasing financial pressure. There is also a social dimension to this instability. Populations across the region begin to feel the effects of rising tension through concerns about safety, economic conditions, and the future. This can lead to shifts in behavior, such as reduced movement, increased caution, or changes in daily routines. In some cases, it can also influence public opinion and increase pressure on governments to take specific actions. Media coverage and information flow play a major role in amplifying the sense of instability. Continuous updates, dramatic visuals, and constant analysis keep the situation in focus, making it feel more immediate and intense. As people follow these developments closely, their perception of risk increases, which can influence both public sentiment and decision-making at different levels. At the same time, the possibility of unintended consequences becomes more significant. In a highly tense environment, even a small incident, such as a misunderstanding or an accidental encounter, can escalate quickly. With multiple actors involved and high levels of alert across the region, the margin for error becomes very small, increasing the overall risk. All of these elements together show how regional instability is not just about the immediate conflict, but about the wider environment that becomes increasingly fragile as tension continues to rise. The level of global attention on this situation reflects how high the stakes have become, not just for the countries directly involved, but for the international system as a whole. When a conflict reaches this intensity, it draws in the focus of major world powers, global institutions, financial markets, and media networks, all of which begin to react in their own ways. This collective attention creates an environment where every development is closely monitored, analyzed, and often interpreted as a signal of what might come next. One of the key reasons for this heightened attention is the potential for wider consequences. Countries around the world understand that a conflict of this scale can influence global stability, economic conditions, and security dynamics. As a result, governments begin preparing for multiple scenarios at once. This can include diplomatic efforts to reduce tension, strategic planning to protect national interests, and coordination with allies to ensure readiness in case the situation escalates further. Global powers also become more active in their responses. Some may attempt to mediate or call for restraint, while others may take positions that align with their strategic interests. These responses are not always uniform, and differences in approach can add another layer of complexity to the situation. The involvement of multiple influential actors increases the number of variables at play, making outcomes harder to predict. Financial markets are another area where the impact of global attention becomes visible. Investors react quickly to uncertainty, adjusting their positions based on perceived risk. This can lead to fluctuations in stock markets, currency values, and commodity prices. Oil markets, in particular, tend to respond sharply to developments in the Middle East, as any disruption or threat to supply routes can influence pricing on a global scale. Media coverage amplifies the sense of urgency surrounding the situation. Continuous reporting, expert analysis, and real-time updates keep the conflict in the public eye. While this ensures that people are informed, it also contributes to a heightened sense of tension, as each new piece of information can shift perceptions and expectations. The way events are presented can influence how audiences understand the situation, adding to the overall intensity. There is also a strategic dimension to how countries respond under global observation. Knowing that their actions are being watched by the entire world, decision makers may factor in not only the immediate outcomes, but also how those actions will be perceived internationally. This can influence the timing, scale, and nature of their decisions as they balance military objectives with diplomatic considerations. At the same time, the combination of global attention and rising stakes creates pressure on all sides. Expectations build quickly, and the space for cautious or delayed responses becomes more limited. Each move carries more weight, and the consequences of missteps become more significant, contributing to an environment where the situation continues to evolve with increasing intensity.